we've learned. So Isaiah prophesied in Judah. Can you remember the kings that he prophesied under? There were 4 kings. The first one was Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and last week we were talking about Hezekiah. I'm glad you got that one. And he was prophesying before and during the Babylonian exile, which took place in 586 BC until 539 BC. He brought warning after warning of God's judgment against Judah because of their rebellion against their covenant relationship with God. He told them that God would use what empire to punish them? The Assyrian first, and then the Babylonian, yeah? But alongside those warnings, Isaiah brought a message of hope. That one day God would fulfill his covenant promises and send a king from David's line to establish his kingdom on earth and to lead God's people in obedience to the laws of the covenant. And then God's blessing and salvation would flow out to all the nations of the world, just as he promised Abraham. Do you remember we had that wonderful picture of God on his throne and all the nations flocking to see him? And it was this hope that motivated Isaiah to speak out against the corruption and the idolatry of Judah and its leaders. So throughout this first half of the book, there's a repeated question. Who will you trust? Who will you depend upon? Trust God and you'll be saved? Put your trust in other things or people and you will be judged. So in chapters 1 to 12, Isaiah accuses Jerusalem's leaders of covenant rebellion, injustice and oppression of the poor, and idolatry. Because of this, God will send other nations to conquer Judah. But this will be like a purifying fire, burning away all that is worthless among God's people. At the same time, the New Jerusalem will be created and populated by a remnant of God's people who've turned back to him. And then through these events, God's kingdom will be established. All nations will gather to learn of God's justice. And this will bring about an age of universal peace and harmony. And this is the basic storyline that's repeated again and again throughout the book, each time with more detail. But at the centre of these verses is Isaiah's vision of God, seated on his throne in the temple, surrounded by the seraphim, crying, "Holy, holy, holy." Isaiah realises how corrupt he and his people are. He's convinced he's going to be destroyed. But instead, he's cleansed. Can you remember how? One of the seraphim came to him, what with? That's it, a burning coal, and placed it where? On his lips, that's it. Isaiah had said, "I am a man of unclean lips, from a people of unclean lips." He saw all their sin as coming out through their speech. And Isaiah is cleansed and then commissioned to tell the people of the coming judgment. But it will be a fruitless task because the people won't listen. Isn't that hard? being told to go and tell everybody what God's going to do, but actually they're not going to listen to you, but you've still got to go and tell them. I feel so sorry for Isaiah in many ways, because he knew right from the beginning that whatever he said, no one was going to listen. But he kept on, and he kept on. And we learned that Judah will be cut down like a tree that's cut down, and there will be a seed that will arise from the stump, the root of Jesse. And who is the root of Jesse? Jesus, the Messiah, exactly. He will free his people from violent and oppressive empires, and he will bring justice to the poor. He'll transform creation and bring peace. Thank you. Thank you, Maya. And then at the end of these chapters, Isaiah saw another empire rising up after Assyria, who would actually succeed in destroying Jerusalem. The next section, chapters 13 to 27, focus on the judgment and hope for the nations. We learn that Assyria will be replaced by the Empire of Babylon, a nation even more violent and destructive and arrogant, with the kings of Babylon claiming to be higher than God. So they too will be brought down. And the other nations around Judah, Moab, Philistia, Damascus, Egypt, Cush and Tyre, all who are proud and unjust will also be brought down. Divine judgment isn't the last word, though. Isaiah goes on to describe two cities, one which thinks itself higher than God and is corrupt and unjust, a poetic description of rebellious humanity, all of us. This city will be destroyed and will be replaced by the New Jerusalem, where God's kingdom reigns over a redeemed humanity from all nations, where there will be no more suffering and no more death. So this is a message for everyone who waits for God to judge violent, oppressive kingdoms and establish his universal kingdom of justice and love. He will do it. Right now, as we look around the world, we think, how? You know, we see the oppression that's taking place. We see the violence. We see the killing and the wars and everything. But God promises that he will establish his kingdom. And so we need to keep our eyes fixed on that. And then the last chapters, 28 to 39, focus again on the fall of Jerusalem. Isaiah rebukes the leaders for turning to what country for help? Egypt. And he tells them that only trust in God and repentance can save Israel now. Egypt is useless. And that's illustrated through the story of Hezekiah, which we looked at last week, yeah? He humbles himself, he asks for God's help when the Assyrian armies attack Jerusalem. And the city is miraculously saved. Now, we did mention it briefly. Can you remember how the city was saved?
An angel of the Lord destroyed the Assyrian army.
That's it. An angel of the Lord came into the Assyrian camp overnight, and 185,000 soldiers were killed. At which point, when everybody woke up the next morning and saw all this, they just ran. But yeah, immediately after this, Hezekiah attempts another political alliance with a delegation from Babylon. He tries to impress them by showing all his treasures, all that he owns. Isaiah confronts him and predicts that his ally, Babylon, will betray him and will return as an enemy to conquer Jerusalem. And that happened 100 years later, when Jerusalem was destroyed and the people taken into exile. All of Isaiah's warnings of judgment led to this moment. And Isaiah was shown to be a true prophet, as it all happened as he said it would. That's the challenge, isn't it? They heard the prophecies, but it was 100 years, wasn't it? And it was even more time before the Messiah came. But those prophecies were fulfilled. And it just reminds me that we need to be telling each other, telling our children and our children's children what God is going to be doing in this world. Because we don't know when Jesus is going to come back. It could be tomorrow, but it might be in 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 years' time. We don't know. And if we don't tell our children, then how will they know? How will they have hope? Well, the purpose of God's judgment was to purify Jerusalem and bring in this messianic kingdom. And as we go into the second half of the book next year, we'll find that that is explored in much greater detail in the second half of the book. So although judgment's still there, the hope of the Messiah, as he is prophesied about, is in that half of the book. So hopefully that's just given you a bit of a reminder. Thank you, Kelly.